farcical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that's right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next patron feedback show here at the SNL Network. If it is your first time joining us for a patron feedback show, this is the show where patrons of the SNL Network come in and host the show with me. We answer SNL questions from people in the community who want to talk about Saturday Night Live and have, different questions about whether it's the episodes or the season themselves and the season itself. And we have social media to talk about. And this is always a very fun segment where we talk about what the SNL cast members are saying on social media. So much fun to get to talk to all the different patrons this season so far. And joining us for the first time on one of our podcasts is the great Matt Struck. Matt, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good, Matt. Please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself because it's the first time they're getting to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm a comedy writer and filmmaker out in Denver. I have several shows, but the one that I kind of put so much of my love into is called Really Late Night with Matt Struck. It's kind of a meta comedy show about a late night show on public access and kind of the trials and tribulations of a character named loosely after me. I also made a cartoon called Matt Toppings, which was a story about a cartoon pizza who his life is falling apart and he's a stand-up comedian. So there's kind of some overlap there. And yeah, I just love, writing and filming and being creative.
Okay. Well, how did you get into Saturday Night Live? I know, obviously, like with all the stuff you're working on, there's a lot of connections between stand-up comedy, between like the different sketches that you're working on and SNL. But I would love to hear how you got into the show.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, I feel like for a lot of people, when you're in high school and you can't like go places, right? You're kind of like stuck with the entertainment at home. So when I was like in middle school and high school, we would all watch Saturday Night Live and then the next week talk about it. And I remember being like, man, I want to be on that show like eventually. That's like my dream. And then it like kind of faded away, and then I kind of got really into music, so I did music for a long time, like experimental strange music. That was my plan to make millions of dollars.
Got it.
And then later on in life I ended up coming back to comedy and appreciation of comedy, and then again experienced this like resurgence of appreciating Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get that. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate to having, a little bit of a dream of potentially one day could they get on the show, that type of thing. So it's cool whatever way we get to interact with the show nowadays. So Matt, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on season 47 so far. Have you enjoyed the season?
Oh yeah, I mean, minus the kind of small dips with like COVID and stuff, I have really
Right.
enjoyed it. And like, I feel like it's interesting kind of watching that it's becoming like a bit more strange, like almost like there's like this Adult Swim kind of influence that's like seeping in, or with like Please Don't Destroy this like YouTube influence. And it's just really interesting to be watching like the voice of comedy like changing in real time noticeably.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Let's explore that a little bit more. So tell me, what are you seeing on the show this season that makes you feel like things are going in a little bit of a different direction?
Offhand, there was like that Kieran Culkin uh sketch where he's like calling the cable company.
Okay.
Do you remember that one? And
Of
it
course.
just
Yeah.
gets like it gets gradually more and more like strange, and then ends with like this deep voice. And on the last episode too, I noticed that I think Pete Davidson had like a deep voice on one of the sketches. They're like kind of making it a little bit more dark almost.
Yes. This, that I agree. I think this was Pete from from last episode.
The timeline you are all living in is about to collapse.
Yeah,
Yes.
so exactly. Yeah, they're playing with like kind of the darkness and fear of like time travel and things going really dark. Or what was the one? It was like with Billie Eilish and Kyle Mooney, and he just like goes in this dark monologue about his like Christmas plans. And I was like, huh, this is really interesting. It's shifting.
Okay, that's cool. Was there an episode, good or bad, this season that you like really stuck out to you that you would like to say? I wanted to talk about this one in particular from what you've seen all season.
Mm, that one, I'm not sure. I forget. Was Elon Musk this season or is he last?
No, that was
season?
that was not the season. Let's not do that.
I liked Kim.
You like? Okay, cool. Okay. So if there wasn't a particular one, then let's talk about this week with Ariana DeBose. So, were you excited to
Okay.
see Ariana get to host the show?
Oh yeah, no, I was super pumped. I mean, obviously, I think that it's become like kind of like a well-covered topic that like Saturday Night Live definitely kind of has a diversity issue. And I feel like that they're getting more in tuned and kind of being better at responding to it. So like yeah, seeing her host, I was like, man, that's like such a great accomplishment for like the Latinx community, to see someone up there. And just the flow of it was just like really like strong. The whole show was like so well put together. And oh, I actually saw a tweet this morning that was like, I can tell I'm getting older because I recognize the hosts more and the musical guests less. So for this last one, I didn't know that band. And I was like, whoa, this is a really good band.
Yeah.
Bleachers.
Well, Jack Antonoff has actually been on the show a couple times before. So he was on with Fun back in the day, and then
Oh,
now, yeah, and then he was on, I think, with Lord as a cameo a few years back as himself. But then this is his new band, and obviously they just did. I mean, we don't do too much music talk here because it's hard to purely evaluate music and say like, okay, yeah, people like music totally differently. Everybody has different opinions. So I think we didn't talk much Bleachers this week, but I do have to say, like, I think across the board, everybody loved what we saw from the Bleachers this week.
right, right. Well, and I think that's one of the things I appreciate about Saturday Night Live. And it's something I even borrowed for last year. We did our first comedy festival called the Really Late Night Sketch Fest, and we had musical guests. And what I realized is it just helps so much with the comedy of being able to take a break and appreciate something that's like more serious or artistic, and then to go back to the absurdity. Like for that, I really give them just props for knowing the formula.
Yeah, 100%. And I do want to bring up this comment. And again, this is an interactive show. We have patrons who are both in the chat as well, and also patrons who can call in if they'd like to. Casey in the chat, one of our great patrons, he'll be on with us in another patron feedback show coming up soon. He says, well, Adult Swim has now been around about 20-ish years, so it's only natural the new, young, up-and-coming hires would be heavily influenced by it. So it's a great point, and he agrees with you, Matt, that there is an Adult Swim influence definitely that we are seeing in the show nowadays.
Totally. Yeah. I can't
Okay.
believe it. That's so crazy. I remember, yeah, also being young watching Adult Swim.
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit more about this episode. How would you grade what you saw this week from Ariana DeBose and the Bleachers episode?
Is there a certain scale or do I just freestyle?
Well, on the hot take shows, we kind of do like 0 to 10, but I don't necessarily need a number from you. I just want to know, like, did you really like the episode? Was there things you wish they could have done better?
Uh, yeah, I feel like I really like the episode. The one that just kind of fell flat, and maybe it's because I'm not like a sports person, was just the kind of NBA on TNT sketch.
Mhm.
Like that one I felt was like really weak and I couldn't like get into it, you know? Um,
Yeah.
but overall, I thought it was like a great flow and also just played with so many different genres, being that there is like a Broadway influence. And I always like it when they go like over the top with like the Broadway stuff.
Okay, you do. Yeah, because that was definitely unique. That was something we spoke about on a roundtable this week, which was, the lack of Broadway hosts that have been chosen. And to me, Matt, I made the point that it's super surprising that they haven't picked more hosts from a Broadway background over the last few years, given how theatrical the cast has been in the last decade.
Right, right. No, that's a really good point. I also think that the political satire they did with kind of talking about Joe Biden and also Eric Adams, those were also really well done because I think during the Trump years it felt like it's kind of easy, low hanging fruit, if you will. Whereas they're able to twist these kind of politicians and like I don't know, there was moments when I actually laughed out loud. Especially like the Eric Adams bit where he keeps talking about how long he's been a cop. Like that part
Yes.
I thought was like really funny.
Yeah, that was outstanding. Honestly, I have to tell you, I've watched it probably 2 or 3 times now, and every single time I get something new out of that impression. So, as Bill said this week on the roundtable, just I hope they don't run it into the ground. But I feel like there's a lot that we can gain here by having more Eric Adams on the show.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So tell me about any cast members that are particularly standing out to you this season that you want to bring up.
Um, like for new ones, I'd have to kind of think of
New
that.
or old? It could be. Yeah.
Okay, I will say that like even though it's not like a sketch officially, I felt like the weekend update was also really strong. And like Michael Che and Colin Jost have been working on just their kind of like chemistry and dynamic for so long. And even the audience like feedback on that, I was like, whoa, they like love them, you know? Like
Yeah, that was
the
crazy.
crowd was very loud for weekend update. I was like, did something just happen? Or
Well,
I
I
think
think
they're
it
just
was
happy
that
to see him.
I think it was that Colin wasn't there last time. So I think that what happened is that they introduced Colin, and then he had to take like a pause. Like it was unexpected, but how loud they cheered for
Right.
Colin Jost. And I
Okay,
think
that's what it was.
Colin's not used to it, right? Because people
Yeah,
are
yeah.
always ripping on Colin. But I think I was even amazed about like how long the applause were going for Colin Jost. And I guess a lot of people were just like very excited to have them back in normal and not have them like sit, Che and Tina sitting on 2 chairs talking to 3 people during update.
Yeah. For anyone who's a Colin Jost fan, he just did a great interview on WTF with Mark Maron not too long ago. And I
Okay.
listened to that on a small road trip, and he's got a really fascinating kind of background. But yeah, I like that they have this dynamic where there's like kind of the jokes also with their reactions to each other. And I tried to think, I think that they're going to be like one of the longer running duos, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure. There's no question. I mean, actually, there was a lot of talk about Jost passing Seth Meyers as the longest tenured weekend update anchor. And Che is going to tie Seth Meyers next week and will pass Seth Meyers in the Willem Dafoe episode. So,
Oh, whoa. Okay. Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah. So they will be the 2 longest running weekend update anchors of all time after this run, which it'll be fun.
Yeah. I also like that their like end of the year tradition where they write jokes for each other.
Right.
You know?
And we missed that at Christmas. I think that's something that they usually do for the holidays as well. That was something that certainly was missed. So that was I would say on the lower list of like things that I wish would have happened in the Paul Rudd show that we missed. Like obviously Five
Right.
Timers Club being at the top of it. But yeah, I do think that yeah, missed that.
Yeah. I will say that I am like also more increasingly excited about Bowen as a cast member. Like
Okay,
the
good.
iceberg sketch when he was the iceberg from Titanic. To me, that is like one of the most like kind of clever weekend update like panel pieces that I've seen in a long time.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think Bowen is having a very solid year. I'm happy to see like sketches across the board. There's not many episodes where he's like not in at least a few things. I think really good step up for Bowen. I'm enjoying what I'm getting to see from him for sure.
Yeah. What about you? Who are you excited about?
I think that honestly, my biggest storyline of the week, and I try not to be too repetitive from podcast to podcast, but I think the story of the week, obviously, Chris Redd is there, but Chris and Heidi, just as cast members, being in their 5th seasons, I made the point that I really felt like they were going to be the forgotten cast. And maybe you can describe that, for previous eras of the show, but I really felt like there was the long timers who have been there for a very long time. There's these new stars that are coming out. I mean, James Austin Johnson, clearly a star. Please Don't Destroy, stars. Everyone's seen that Sarah Sherman has the potential to be a star. Everyone's really enjoyed what Aristotle has done with Save For Me. So I think there is potential for all of these new people. And my biggest concern was like, oh my God, we're going to go another year with potentially like Heidi and Chris, and I guess I'll throw Melissa in there. I'll say as people who are going to end up being kind of, hidden. And that's not what happened. At least in the case of Heidi and Chris. I think that Heidi is pretty much maybe behind Keenan, but second in the most sketches this entire season. Chris clearly dominated the show So
Mhm.
the potential for these two people to be the leaders of the cast in the future is very high.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
Chris Rett's great.
for sure. Yes, and I do see Blood Meridian. I see you in the chat. Yeah, we do have. We will be getting to your question later on in the show for sure, where we're going to talk more about stuff like this. Okay, Matt. Anything else from the season, the cast, the episodes that you want to make sure we talk about before we get into social media this week?
Um, I don't think so. I think digging into some social media sounds like a good plan.
Cool. So let's do that. So we're going to get into our social media of the week. Matt, I will read out something from social media. Let us know your thoughts and comments on it. Chat as well. I would love to get your comments on everything from social media. And if we missed something, if we didn't, if our wonderful intern or I missed something to put in the document and you saw something fun on social media, put it in the chat. We'll make sure to read it out as part of our social media section of today's podcast. All right. Let's start right at the beginning with on Instagram. Air_Stottle, Aristotle Atari. He says, yes, I was in last night's episode. I'm the new Spider-Man in the SNLU. And I have to tell you, Matt, this has been a huge thing behind the scenes at the SNL Network. Us trying to sleuth our way to find and figure out who was Spider-Man. Because I was not sure if it was a joke. So when you saw this, did you believe Aristotle?
I did not. And I was like, oh, they're just, he's just messing around. And because that could be anyone, I can see it. It's a great way to kind of take credit, And then the more that I read into it, I was like, oh, okay, they're actually showing us that they're proud that they're Spider-Man.
I have to. I'm just gonna say this. I haven't gotten more questions about one thing in a very long time. Like the amount of DMs we got about this, trying to figure it out, has been crazy. I had people sending us height comparisons between Aristotle and the Spider-Man in the cold open to try and figure out if this was actually this person. I ended up trying to ask as many people as possible. A lot of people were very coy about it. So here's the sequence of events. What happened is I was pretty sure that it was Aristotle. Then I went and I looked at the good nights, and Aristotle is not in the good nights. So I looked, our friend Mike looked, we were, looking, we're okay, Aristotle, it couldn't have been Aristotle. He wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, it was Aristotle. we asked many people. It was Aristotle. I don't know why he wasn't in the good nights, but apparently he was Spider-Man. So he did say live from New York, and we'll put that as counting for a live from New York for Aristotle. We'll count that in the statistics. But SNL, you made it hard for us to figure that out this week.
Right. The story has been broken right here. The deep scoops. That's why people come here, for the deep scoops,
Yes, 100%. Okay, so that is that. Next up, we have the great Louis Zakarian, who does makeup for the show. And he posted on Instagram, if you go to @LouisZFX, James Austin Johnson as Biden in the cold open to get to see that makeup. And I believe there's some photos and some videos. I always encourage you to go check out his account. It's really, really great to get to see how they do the prosthetics for the different impressions that they do. And especially how accurate JAJ ends up looking like Biden, let alone sounding like him. So it was very, very cool to go check this out. The pictures or the description of the picture doesn't do it justice. Definitely go to his Instagram account.
Yeah. Yeah, that was when he first showed up as Biden, it was an actual relief, because I feel like they kept trying it with all kinds of different actors. And I remember Jim Carrey got huge flack for his Biden impersonation, but his impersonation is so on it and good,
Yeah, it's really, really good. And I think we would have seen it again in the Paul Rudd show if it wasn't for COVID. That would have been the time we would have seen it. But but we got to see it here open up 2022. And I do think there was a lot of stories about, like we said, about Chris, this week. And he was definitely the star, and Kate McKinnon with regards to her roles with Ariana. But I do think underrated story of the week is, again, James Austin Johnson kicking off the second half of the season. I think that's a deliberate choice by the show to really, put him front and center as the future star of the show. So very impressive from James Austin Johnson.
Yeah. And what I like about what he captures about Biden is just kind of this almost frustration at times, in a way that they were just trying to paint him as forgetful before. and like having that edge of frustration, I think is like what I like about it. It like makes it more human.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It's really fascinating, and I can't wait to see what we're gonna get more from JAJ. Is there anything that you would like to see from him more in the second half of the season?
Um, that I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like I just see him so much as Biden. I'm curious to see what other characters will be like.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so Ariana DeBose was huge on social media this week. I mean, she's a great Twitter account, a great Instagram account. So I had heard prior to her episode that the cast really loved her. They were so thrilled to have her in. She's just apparently just like a really nice person that people loved to be with this week. She posted on Instagram. Keenan responded with a bunch of fire emojis, and Ariana said to Keenan, "Thank you for your help and support this week. Mad respect for you and what you do. Hilarious." So oftentimes we get to hear about Keenan Thompson being the veteran of the cast, getting to interact with a new host, somebody who may be unfamiliar with the cue cards and the familiarity of 8H. It doesn't work from necessarily always to go from Broadway to that stage, but I think having someone like Keenan Thompson around is really comforting for a lot of these new hosts.
Yeah. I love the screenshot too of these like comments, and watching everyone be so like supportive and nice to each other is like really heartwarming.
100%. At Chris Red is on Instagram, says, "You're incredible and so damn fun to play with." Ariana says, "Back at you, Rockstar." At Heidi L. Gardner says, "You were a bright light. Thank you for being so funny, kind, and fun to be around. You made this week so sweet!" Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Congratulations on everything. Ariana says, "I lure you, lure." A heart eyes emoji.
Nice.
Yeah. Just really, really, really great. Okay. I'm gonna skip the next one because I do want to talk about that in a little bit. We see that Jimmy Akimbola from Family Matters said, "I've always wanted to be on SNL. Gonna start working on my NBC SNL monologue. Hashtag Bel Air Peacock. Hashtag manifest." What did you think of the Bel Air / Urkel pre-tape that we got to see?
I thought it was good, but I could have swore I saw something similar to it, like on social media before that, and I probably should have researched it. But I feel like I saw something like that recently, so I was
You're
kind of
saying you
like,
saw somebody else do this?
I feel like I saw like an Urkel style reboot joke on YouTube. So when I saw it, I was confused. I was like, wait, did I see this already? Or am I mixing it up? Because I know they did the Fresh Prince. But
Okay.
yeah, I might be wrong.
What do you think
I
of this
don't
one?
know. I kind of wasn't too into it, honestly.
Interesting. It's been so hit and miss. I really love this, but it's been hit and miss for a lot of people. But yeah, I did really enjoy it, and I felt like Chris did such a good job with it.
I think this is probably why I'm not totally into it. I feel like when they did that parody of Oscar the Grouch, that's like when they hit that joke. And this is coming to me right now as we're speaking. And I think that's why I was kind of like, oh, you guys kind of already made that joke, you know? But with Oscar the
Okay.
Grouch, it is like kind of better, I think.
That's fair. That's totally fair. All right, so I'm going to scroll down to this next one, which is from Mayor Eric Adams, and this is something I know you said that you really like. So, at New York City Mayor says, "Chris Red is hilarious and looked great." All next in capital letters, but it's not true that I haven't been sick for 60 years, which is why I got vaccinated and boosted, and all New Yorkers should as well. So, Mayor Eric Adams, getting that in. He also says, "P.S. at Red said it. You forgot my earring." So. Great of Mayor Eric Adams to play along. How long, Matt, do you think it's going to take before we see Eric Adams on SNL?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if next week he's like making like what are those like walk up behinds, like the creep up where the real person and the impersonator are there.
Yes, that could happen.
Yeah. Well, and that sketch in particular just really had me going when he just kept saying like how long he's been a cop, and that number just kept going.
Yeah, that was really great.
Yeah.
At Red said it, replied to him, crying face emoji. "I appreciate that, comma, Mayor Adams, exclamation mark, notes taken, and I got you next time," I guess with regards to the earring. So flexing emoji. So great to see them playing along.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
always nice when they're a good sport about it.
For sure, for sure. At Holly Robinson Pete's says, at Red said it, you killed it in this. Hashtag swagger, hashtag XNL, crying face, crying face, crying face, crying face emoji. So a lot of people seem to really, really like this one.
Yeah. And two of those are sideways crying faces, just so that way I don't want you to be taken out of context.
Oh, thank you. Thank you,
The
Matt. I
internet is
appreciate that.
ruthless. Yeah.
That's a good co-host. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We got a great tweet from at Orville IV, otherwise known as Will Forte. This is about as exciting as it gets in reference to SNL posting about him hosting the show this week. Thanks at NBC SNL. Can't wait for Saturday. So, Matt, you excited to see Will Forte come in?
Oh yeah, Will Forte. He's one of my favorites, not just on Saturday Night Live, but kind of the other stuff that he's done, like cameos on Tim and Eric, and and MacGruber, which I'm like really excited to see the sequel and see him host. And
Yes.
he's like, his energy is just one of my favorites. Oh, and like Nebraska, and he's done like serious acting, like he's like such a like multi-dimensional like comedy personality. I'm pretty excited.
100%. And I mean, I've been holding in my excitement all week because I just don't want to be I want to be objective, but it's hard because I'm
Right.
so excited for Will Forte. Here's a great tweet we got. So we got a tweet from Mike Shoemaker, who is obviously a producer at Saturday Night Live and now produces Late Night with Seth Meyers. And he posted a photo from inside the studio where they have all the cast photos. And he says, one is still in the cast, comma, one is still the announcer, comma, and the others are all hosts as of this week. And let me bring up that picture on screen for everybody. So this is the season 32 cast photo. And Matt, I have to say, what an incredible group of people over here. To me, the greatest season of all time.
Right. Yeah. Well, and just like so much of like the things they went on to make, like Seth with Late Night, and then like Bill Hader with what's that show on HBO?
Oh,
Barry.
Barry. Thank you. I totally blanked the same time as you. That wasn't good. But
Right,
it's not. I mean, look, they've all obviously had great sitcoms. They've been in movies. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's been happening after the show, but even just on the show itself. I mean, just in terms of like high quality across the board. The great thing is about this cast is like, number one, it was small. Daryl was probably at the later stage of his career. He wasn't in that many sketches anymore. He was still doing some impressions and doing some update pieces, but he wasn't really in too many sketches. Seth was on Update at that point and wasn't really doing too many sketches. So you're talking about a cast pretty much of, Kristen, Maya, and Amy. And then for the guys, I mean, Will, Andy, Keenan, Bill, Fred, and Jason. And that's like the most, concise cast, since probably the beginning of the show. And I know part of it was because the season prior, or a couple seasons prior, they had whatever it was, NBC made them like fire a bunch of people. But just in terms of quality, I mean, they just put together so much great work because they were a small team working together, and it was so much fun to get to watch every single episode. I remember watching live every week throughout season 32. And I was in grade 8, and I was just fascinated with what I was seeing every week.
Yeah. And like, I feel like, especially just like, there's like a special kind of pressure from what I've gathered of when you've been a cast member and you go to host, that it's like kind of a different experience than when you're just like a host or, like a movie star celebrity who comes into Saturday Night Live. So like, I can't imagine what that's like for them, because they're both like in familiar territory and in very unfamiliar because it's brand new,
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. And, look, some of their hosting returns were better than others, but I would say like, just from based on what we saw from Jason, my biggest worry would have been like, okay, how does somebody translate into this era of the show? And the fact that they just crushed it with Jason this season gives me high hopes for what we're going to get to see with Will this week.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, looking at this picture too, it really can like you can draw up like how the chemistry kind of made that season. I heard like an interview, it was with Lorne Michaels, and he was talking about like, people aren't pulled and hired and fired all independently. It all works as this like cohesive kind of like bigger picture of what it looks like all together. And yeah, looking at this like kind of cast, it's like, oh yeah, I definitely remember the sketches that were coming out around that time.
For sure. And honestly, it was like, I'll just give like a little bit of like anecdote of like where I was just watching this, going into season 33. I was just so excited for like, oh my God, the momentum is going to stay there. And then we hit the writer strike that time, and Maya Rudolph left the show. And it was like, for me, it was like, the like 27 Yankees broke up. Like it was like the one of the greats was like leaving, and it was so crazy. And then obviously we had some some new people come in, like Bobby Moynihan, who ended up being a great cast member. But it was really one of those things that was just like every single time one of them left the show, it was heartbreaking because they were so good at what they did. And Matt, what I will say is just one more comment on Will before we start getting to some questions is I was talking to one of our podcasters this week about why Will Forte was not celebrated leaving the show in a way that Bill Hader was, and Fred Armisen and Andy Samberg and Kristen Wiig. Why did Will not get the same treatment? I mean, obviously Will was on the show for a very long time, 2002 to 2010, and didn't get the same treatment. And my opinion on this is, Matt, and I want to hear your 2 cents as well, was just that, number one, I think it was unexpected that Will was leaving when he left. But number two, I think that in retrospect, all those big goodbyes and all those people leaving at the same time made Will's leaving the show, a couple years earlier in 2010 versus 2012 or 13, made it kind of forgettable that he left the show in a way, which is a really
like
big shame.
Overshadowed.
Yes. So I would say it's that. I would also say the fact is that there was the Betty White episode, and then I believe, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if this was the time when Alec Baldwin passed Steve Martin for the hosting record, was it in 2010? Because I just think like those were the last episodes for Will Forte. So I think in the end, there was no like giant celebration for him leaving the show. And we talked about this with Jason. My hope is that this week will be the celebration for him.
Yeah, that would be really amazing. And I mean, I'm thinking that it must have been just a last minute decision, that it wasn't like planned either on part of SNL or him, something, because it seems like with like the bigger names, they tend to do something,
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But I like that idea, like a sign off, like this time around.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think the show needs to celebrate him. He just did so well on the show. So, yeah, and I see some people commenting about how Will's final year wasn't as good as the previous ones, and I would say like he was probably hit his peak somewhere in the 2007, 8, 9 range. So totally fair about that. I don't, Casey, I know you're asking, Forte was planning on coming back, and the last minute Lauren decided not to renew his contract. I'm not sure about that. I do know that he hadn't decided, or it wasn't announced that he was leaving the show until very, very close to the start of the next season. So interesting to know, what really happened behind the scenes there.
Yeah. Well, and like, it's such a grind, and I've heard so many like interviews with cast members and writers that say it is like one of the hardest, most stressful jobs they've ever had. And I heard like an interesting like anecdote with Seth Meyers where after he tells people that they've got the show, he just really lets them enjoy it because it's the last good news that they're going to have in a very long time, which I think is really
that
funny.
can't be true. Yeah.
Yeah. He said it.
Yeah. I think that's overblown.
Because sketches get pulled, they like get thrown out last minute, that you go weeks without it. He's like, there's just a whole ecosystem of like having to deal with changes,
Yeah, I think that there's, if you're not succeeding at SNL, there's probably nothing more depressing as somebody who is so excited to be on the show than to not, continue to continue to build on that momentum. But like, a lot of people have to be patient when it comes to getting on SNL and then growing and stuff. We've seen that, like I said, with the Heidi Gardners and the Chris Reds. But for me, this new cast, they've obviously done things differently this season where they are giving them their chances. So I think every era is different, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to get into some feedback questions, Matt?
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Let's talk about, so I have a question, Matt. So I was looking through the feedback questions this week and putting them into our document for us to share. Did you send in a feedback question for yourself?
I don't know. I might have been confused.
Okay.
Although it would work in kind of my meta comedy to ask myself a question.
All right. So Matt, would you read the question from Matt Struck?
Okay. Yes. Matt from Denver writes, oh, where'd it go?
You got it? Or do you want me to read it?
You read the first half. I'll read the second half.
Okay. Matt from Denver writes.
Okay, go ahead and wait. I think I'm here.
You got it?
Here we go.
It.
Oh, Struck. My last name's Struck.
Got it.
What was the strongest sketch from the Ariana DeBose episode?
All right, Matt. So do you have an opinion on this?
Great question, Matt. I really love your insight. I actually really like the new governess sketch, which is the Sound of Music parody. And while on the surface it doesn't seem like the strongest, I will say that it was the most original out of all of them, right? Because a lot of them, you kind of get the game of the bit really fast of like, oh, okay, I see. They're a wedding dress company that doesn't know what they're doing. But for that one, it kept revealing itself as just strange. And for that, I give it the most amount of points because I really enjoy originality.
Okay, wait, sorry. So I just want to clarify. The new governess sketch was the one with from The Sound of Music. So do you mean the Sound of Music one, or you mean the Winter Formal one with the?
The Sound of Music.
Okay, The Sound of Music. Got it. Okay.
I like the Winter Formal, but the Winter Formal has that classic SNL, right? It's like a commercial and they're incompetent, which I love too. But the new governess really surprised me. And I think that's when I enjoy comedy the most, is when I'm like actually surprised, you know?
Okay, got it. So I wouldn't necessarily describe SNL and Sound of Music parodies as original, but I get what you're saying in terms of like where they went with this was probably somewhat different than the ones that they've done in the past. I just think it wasn't, I don't know, I feel like it wasn't weird enough. I feel like some of the lines were super weird. Like the Queen Latifah thing, people seem to really like. I played this line on the round table, which I really think was just my favorite line from the sketch.
Me, a kid who pees in the sink.
Like they should have gone more with stuff like that. Like that to me was like kind of weird and ridiculous. So that I would say was had its moments for sure. For me, it has to be the Eric Adams thing. I think that was definitely my strongest sketch of the night. Great. There was just such great sketch writing, so fast paced. I love fast paced sketch writing. I love it. I love wordplay. So for me, this was right up my alley.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. This is
and you can't see it, but my second answer was also Eric Adams. I did a little research. So
okay, I believe you. All right. This is a question from Jeremy Boulard, who says, Matt, why does the Ariana DeBose episode feel so underhyped compared to others this season?
I'm wondering, I know a follow-up isn't easy. Underhyped after the fact or underhyped like before?
I feel like before. I mean, all I could say from our social media, at least, it did probably feel a little bit underhyped. I would say like usually there's more, more people talking about the show, and then I could probably see in terms of like podcast numbers and in social media numbers, it seemed that there could have been like less interactions this particular week. I do wonder if maybe not for like the diehards, like all the people who, join us in the chat and the people who we get to talk to on a regular basis, maybe it wouldn't affect them, but could it be possible that they were turned off, general SNL fans, from what they saw with the Paul Rudd episode? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, it's possible that they lost the momentum, just kind of like, just like the brand when it suddenly is like pulled, and then now it's like not a throwaway show, you know what I'm saying? That it was kind of like put together, pre-recorded. it's possible that that did affect kind of just overall excitement and also potentially even momentum in the machine itself, because then you have to come back from that. And then you're answering questions about what does next week's show look like.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if Jeremy was asking about like after the fact or before the fact. I think if it's after the fact, I would say there were definitely like it was definitely this episode was probably like more polarizing than some of the others. Like either you really liked it or you really didn't. But I think if you're talking about before the episode and you're asking why that was underhyped, I think like Ken says in the chat, like I don't know how many people knew who Ariana was, and that probably led into like the excitement. I think, a lot of people are into the NFL playoffs. Like, could it have been like that? There's other things going on right now. John in the chat said he would chalk it up to some people not knowing who Ariana DeBose was. And then the additional factor of not being super confident that there would be a show. So I agree, John. Like, I think that I was surprised that there wasn't as much talk about Saturday Night Live coming into this week, but I don't think it's going to last because obviously the next two hosts are very well hyped.
Right. Yeah, well, and the ones that seem to break the internet are the like mega names where people doubt that they can do comedy, right? Like Elon or Kim K, like those kinds of names, very recognizable, and that seems to light the internet on fire. And then they balance it out with someone who's more niche or more kind of an expert in their field, like a Broadway star.
Yes, I agree. Okay, Jeremy, I hope we answered your question. This one comes from Naomi. I think Naomi's in the chat as well. Naomi YS says, about the Elmo Weekend Update bit, it made me wonder, has a cartoon ever hosted SNL before, Muppets or etc.? Well, first, let me ask you, did you enjoy the Elmo bit from Chloe?
What's funny is I was actually out of the loop on the Elmo beef to begin with. So I ended up having to I like stopped it and then went and did research and was like, okay, what are they talking about? Because there's obviously something here. And then when I came back to it, I did enjoy it.
Okay. Yes. I enjoyed seeing Chloe on Update more than I enjoyed the actual piece itself. So I would say, yeah, I would say it was okay. With regards to has a cartoon ever hosted the show before? Well, the Muppets were originally part of the cast in season 1. So they had a segment on the show every single week. But I don't believe that a fictional character has hosted the show before, except for Don Novello, who was a original writer and cast member, hosting as Father Guido Sarducci, or like people like Garth Brooks hosting as Chris Gaines, things like that, where people are hosting under like pseudonyms. We obviously had the Childish Gambino a little bit while ago. So there are things like that, but I don't think that. Casey pointed out something good in the chat. They came pretty close when Beavis and Butthead did an update commentary for Norm back in '96. Yeah, that is actually a great reference, Casey. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Nice. Deep cut, Casey.
Yeah. Oh, and Pee Wee Herman, of course. Yes, of course. How could I forget?
Right. Yeah.
So
no, but I could see like eventually them doing like, because I'm sure with COVID they've had to think like we need to maybe think of backup ideas, but doing like a Pixar character or something. I mean, they probably wouldn't let a Pixar character host, but that in order for it to stay alive, it's going to have to keep changing and growing within its own format,
Okay.
So maybe
let me be a little bit out of character here. And I don't mean a character like that, but SNL producers that sometimes listen to the show, please do not ever have a character host SNL. Please have real people host SNL. I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. That might be one of those on paper things that in real life.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And honestly, I cannot deal with the everybody talking to me about the week that Elmo hosts the show, and it becomes a whole other thing.
Right.
Okay. Let's take this question from Blood Meridian in the chat. He asked us, he sent into our forum, as this feels more and more like an actual transition year, in your view, how will our newbies from this season, especially how Sarah seems to rise through the ranks as a wild card and a Forte-esque cast member, James being the impressionist and utility player, Aristotle getting to be more of a character performer, how will they and some of the slightly newer cast members shape the upcoming era in your view? Who is the potential to be the next Kater Beck and the general experimental atmosphere on the rise? Okay, so long question here from Blood Meridian, but I would like to get your opinion, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that Sarah Sherman is going to be like bringing kind of the weird, you know? Like, and I've kind of wondered how much of the more kind of deep voice strangeness is kind of her influence. But I definitely think it's going to be like refreshing and kind of like reinventing kind of the voices and yeah, shifting more to a kind of like edgier kind of show.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that James and Sarah are shoo-ins as far as I'm concerned for being like regulars as part of regular sketches. Now the question is like the problem is that they're so uniquely different, those three new cast members, so it's hard to envision how they all continue to work together. But I think what we have seen from this year, despite a lot of people not liking that, is that Sarah can play normal and they can put her in sketches, and I think we're going to need that. I think that obviously James Austin Johnson is going to be, the great impressionist for the next however many years, probably the best impressionist they've had on the show in a very long time. Aristotle to me is still somewhat of a question mark. I think that he's obviously proved that he could do really good character work. But I would continuously like to see him in more stuff. I obviously think there's, people at the top that will need to go out for those three to shape the next generation of the show. But I think, I think I'm really enjoying what could potentially be the future of the show. And I think this goes more to answer your question, Blood Meridian, which is, we're obviously headed towards, the 50th anniversary. That's the big, point that everybody's thinking about. And the question is like, what cast will we get for that show? And I think that every single new cast member that they brought in this year, including Please Don't Destroy, who are almost cast members, I would say I could envision being part of the next great cast. So in terms of like tone, I'm not really sure what it is, but I do feel like there's a special momentum that the show hasn't felt in a long time that's starting to build. Like we're seeing them, put the twigs together for the fire, and we're gonna light it in a couple seasons.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, someone who I want to add to this conversation is Andrew Dismukes, who in
Of
the
course,
Winter
yeah.
Formal, he's the the teenager, if anyone's kind of wondering. But for him to be like a writer first and then become a cast member, it kind of reminds me of like John Mulaney. So I am also kind of curious, like what his voice is going to be, and if he's going to be just this kind of like diamond in the rough that we'll see even on a bigger scale after SNL. But he is also kind of one of my new favorite cast members. I forgot to add
I
that
think he's
earlier.
becoming my favorite cast member.
He's
I
great.
think so. Yeah, because he's taking the I wouldn't say in terms of like well, obviously we talk on our By the Numbers show about like the analytics about who's really filling the Beck roles. We're getting like a lot of Alex Moffat taking over for Beck and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
in terms of like actual characters on the show, I think that Andrew is taking over the Beck roles of being able to purely make fun of himself. And that is what is so exciting to see. I love everything we're getting from Andrew Dismuke so far. I do see Nick in the chat points out something which I was going to say, which is if I had to say somebody of the younger group, of the, Bowen and Chloe and Ego and Dismukes, and obviously all the new people we're going to see this season, there's also Punky, who, despite being like a really cool person, has done some really nice stuff. Like, I still don't know where she fits. So that's something that I don't know if she fits in this next cast. I hope she does, because I think that she seems like a great performer. She seems like she's really funny. Diversity, obviously super important to have at the show, but I don't see her getting the opportunities. Obviously this week doesn't count because she was out, but I wish she had more chances.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about a question from Monette. Matt, do you want to read out this question from Monette?
Yes. Monette, regarding the 10-1, would you like to see more original character work from JAJ as opposed to just the impressions he can do? Oh, this is perfect. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, I think kind of seeing the other characters, because with a good impressionist, they can get so lost in it, And I would be really curious to see what kind of other characters that they can pull off, you know?
Yes, I would say that to answer that question directly, I definitely think original character work. I think we have to get to a point, and what was great about what James Austin Johnson did this week with the sketch was like, hey, it was a super like local specific sketch. It wasn't necessarily for me, but I know there are people out there who really like the Longhorn sketch for its weirdness and the fact that they could relate to that stuff. They're like, oh, I've been to a Longhorn a million times. I understand that. So that is great. I think that we have to get back to 10 to 1s being really, really weird. Like, not just weird because it's like local weird, weird because it's just strange. And I think that Will Forte and Willem Dafoe coming in are two great hosts to like give SNL a kick in the ass towards the weird side. And I'm just very hopeful for what we're going to see. And that includes new characters debuting at the end of the show. And I think that would be really fun.
Yeah. I mean, there is something to be said of the like Daryl Hammond kind of role where they are just these specialized kind of impressionists and that's what they do. And it's so good that that's kind of like almost like a kicker on a football team or something. So I'm curious if, you know, which way he'll go.
For sure. And look, if JJ was in front of me right now and was like, "Hey John, like you've watched a ton of SNL, like what would you advise that I would continue to do to build my momentum at Saturday Night Live?" I would say to him, I want to see JJ on Weekend Update. Because I think we need to get a chance to hear him speak out of impression. My worry is as great and as an all-time great as Daryl was, we needed to get to know him a little bit more. And I think there is a danger there, even though he's excelling on the show, to him just being the impression guy. And we need to see more from who is James Austin Johnson. Like, let us in a little bit as fans. We want to know who you are. Remove the mystique from your characters a little bit.
Yeah. Quick follow-up. So like the Longhorn bit, I kind of didn't totally get it. And since it was like later in the show, I was like, oh, this is when they were tired writing it. Can you explain it to me a little bit more?
Okay, so I'm not the right person to definitely explain this to you. I think that from what I was told,
from what you've gathered.
From what I've gathered is that there's like certain intonations that if you go to a Longhorn steakhouse, that the people who work there will end up talking like that. And it's a very localized thing. So I think it's probably a Southern thing that if you go there, you would hear that. I mean, we had Jeff Richards on the roundtable this week for a segment, and he mentioned how this was his favorite sketch. So I know there were people that liked it. I mean, I spoke to some people closer to the show, and they said that they were surprised that I didn't like it. And I just said, I was like, look, I just have to be objective about it. Like I'm from Canada. Like this like Texarkana stuff that I don't always get, and I know it's like something about. There's something to the effect. I think there's a certain type of comedy of like when you live really close to the border from one state to another, like oftentimes you end up, ripping on what you get to see from, the other side of the border type of thing that happens much more in the States than it probably does up here in Canada. And I think there was something to be, played here because of the way JJ grew up and him going to a bunch of these Longhorns.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get it, but I did like it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. We have a question here from Ike Moore, one of our great patrons. Ike says, we haven't had any stand-up comedians host yet this season. Who will be the first? All right, Matt, what do you think?
Well, I was kind of trying to check to see if, just want to make sure, but I really love Tig Notaro, and I feel like Tig Notaro would be like an amazing host. Cool.
Chat, let me know if there's any stand-up comedians that you would like to see host this season. I mean, obviously we had Bill Burr last season, which was pretty huge, and a lot of people really enjoyed to get to hear from Bill. So that would be cool. But yeah, I do wonder if that's a direction. Obviously we had Chappelle as well, a different story after the election, but would be cool to see some more stand-up comedians on Saturday Night Live in season 47. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. I get some Patton Oswalt. That would be great. That would be really great to get to see him on the show. Nicole Byer as well. So yeah, let me know if put them in the chat. I'll read them out in a second as I get towards the next question. Okay, this is also from our friend Ike. Ike says, when alumni return, I wonder if they just spend one day telling old stories to newer casts. So what do you think? If Matt, do you envision that the cast is gathering around Will Forte like they're kids listening to somebody tell, old folks telling stories about their childhoods?
I feel like there has to be some sort of socializing, and like for someone who grew up to like watch them be on TV and then like meeting them in person, I feel like a moment like that must pop up organically, you know?
Yeah. I think for sure. I would say, Ike, the answer to this question is I think in general, yes. I would say that it may be a little bit different due to COVID restrictions. My understanding is the traditional Monday meeting that usually gets done in Lauren's office where people are just pitching sketches to the host is now done over Zoom, I believe. So I think that that's something that they probably lost like a little bit of time with stuff like that. But I think like later on in the weeks, starting on, Wednesday, today, tomorrow, I think those are the times when a lot of people will be interacting with Will. And I'm sure that, especially if there's some cameos, I'm sure there's going to be some fun stories as people get to know each other around 8H this week.
For sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the one from Scott?
Yeah, let me just also bring up people in the chat who said, Ken said Bo Burnham, Nick said Jim Jeffries, and John Oliver as well for stand-up comedians to host.
Okay, oh yeah,
Matt.
That's true. Bo Burnham would be good, and John Oliver. And I would say that out of all the ones we've just listed, I feel like John Oliver would be on the chopping block very soon. Just with his success of Last Week Tonight and all the film stuff, that would make a lot of sense.
That would be really fun. Okay, Matt, you want to read out the next one?
Oh, yeah. So Scott asks, which character do you think Will Forte is most likely to reprise?
So there are a lot of really good ones. Do you want to start with this one or do you want me to go?
I mean, I think again with MacGruber, it's kind of like a no-brainer, especially with the sequel being on like Peacock. They're going to want to be like, hey everyone, in case you haven't watched it, here's MacGruber. And I'm curious to see, because I watched a bunch of old ones. I'm curious how he's going to be kind of doing it, given just the like cultural awareness about like sensitivity around like race and gender, because that's like MacGruber's thing. He like has no idea. So what does that look like in 2022, you know?
Yeah, I think that there's like I don't know. Maybe I'm just like a sucker for. If there's a lot of sexual innuendos here, but maybe I'm a sucker for Will Forte, where I could just like know that anything he's saying he could pull off. But like the way he pulls off the crazy stuff that MacGruber says, or that Hamilton, his character, says, I think he can.
Yeah.
He could like do that in a way that's like no one's gonna be offended because it's Will.
Right.
So.
Well, and Hamilton is so extreme that it like is known that that's like the way it's built.
For sure. One of the things I've been thinking about, and again, like I don't want to ruin like a great thing, but I have been thinking about like my favorite sketch of all time, which I don't always talk about on this show. But my favorite sketch of all time was the dancing coach sketch from the Peyton Manning episode. Matt, do you remember this sketch?
I do, and I remember him talking about it too, but can you refresh my memory a bit?
Okay, so he's basically like it's halftime at a basketball game, and the coach comes in, and Will Forte is playing the coach, and then he ends up playing a song. And it's a song from Casino Royale, I believe, and he ends up dancing, and he has like some of the most hilarious dancing that he ends up doing, along with Peyton Manning, and they end up dancing together. And it's like everyone in the cast is like crying, laughing behind Will. And I believe they did this once again during the Michael Phelps episode, I'm pretty sure. But I wonder if there's a third edition of this sketch that will pull out this week.
Yeah. No, I remember that one. That one's a good one. Yeah, I had hoped that they'd reference it at least.
Yes.
Gotta bring back the classics.
For sure. There's also, I will say, another sketch that I have not brought up on the podcast this week that I absolutely love of Will Forte is the Give Up the Ham sketch, which was one of his original sketches from very early on in his run. I believe that was from the Queen Latifah episode, I think from Will's like first season on the show. But if you're ever looking for something funny from Will and you haven't gone back to watch his old stuff, definitely go check out Give Up the Ham. Google that one. It's one of the best things ever.
I'm writing it down.
Yes, for sure. I mean, obviously Jeff Montgomery, a lot of people are like, hey, yes or no. Tim Calhoun. There's so many good ones because Will is, one of the greatest character. It has created some of the greatest characters, I think, in the history of the show. I really just think, I just think his are so amazing that if we got at least two of them on the show, I'd be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Benjamin Lamb, one of our great patrons, says, I feel like the Will Forte episode cannot happen without any cameos. Do you think there will be? And who will it be? So Matt, let you make some predictions.
I mean, maybe this is hopeful thinking, but it would be nice to see Kristen Wiig or Bill Hader also kind of come, bring the friends back with him.
Okay.
And if there's a MacGruber thing, then a Kristen Wiig character would make sense,
Yes, so Kristen Wiig would make sense. The ghost of Maya Rudolph might make sense for that as well. Would be interesting, but yeah, interesting chat that you don't want any cameos. I mean, I don't mind some cameos. I think it would be fun. I think that Jason would obviously be somebody who him and Will during Will's like last 2 or 3 seasons on the show, they just were partnered on so much stuff together. So I don't mind seeing them together. I doubt we're gonna get too many cameos. Could Fred or Bill show up? I mean, it's always possible, but you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
But I don't think there's I think Kristen is like the obvious one. I think if we're gonna make the Vegas odds, Matt, on cameos to show up, I think Kristen by far has the greatest odds. I don't think that. Yeah, and I would say, people are talking about, Ken says in the chat that Jason's in London probably filming Ted Lasso, so there's a good chance that doesn't happen. But I'm okay if Will's there on his own. I'd love to see Will interacting with this cast. But if there was going to be like one sketch like we had with What's Up With That, where we had some cameos in it, I don't mind that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, okay, this is a slightly different version of this question from Haley McLaughlin. Came to us on Instagram and said, what cameos are you hoping for in the Will Forte episode? So I asked you for your predictions, but who would you hope to see if you really wanted to see somebody?
Bill Hader. I love Bill Hader so much. And like Barry, just amazed me. But then also when he had kind of talked about how he suffered from anxiety, and I also have anxiety. So it was really interesting to see a comedy hero be so vulnerable and open about something that I didn't even think was possible. You're on the biggest comedy show ever and you're shaking from anxiety and throwing up. And then he got it under control. I just thought that was so cool. So I would hope Bill Hader shows up.
Okay. Yeah, I actually, I'm just gonna throw something out. It's not too many people are talking about it, but I hope Andy Samberg shows up. I think it would be really fun. Yeah, I think that this could be a really fun week to potentially have Andy show up. Maybe there is something, something to do with digital shorts that we could potentially get. Maybe a digital short, Please Don't Destroy Stuff. I mean, that could be saved eventually for when Andy hosts the show in the future. But I think out of all the cast, I mean, he's the one that's probably least mentioned as somebody who would come in with Will Forte. But I think it would be really, really fun to have, potentially. I wouldn't mind if they ended up seeing Kristen Wiig, Andy Samberg, and Maya Rudolph show up. I think if those were the 3 that showed up together, I think that would be really fun, and they could do some cute things together, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Yeah, Maya Rudolph would be awesome. And what was their Destiny's Child? Kind of Gemini's twin.
Yeah, Gemini's twin.
It'd be great. Yes. Yeah. And then we could bring back some really good old stuff too.
For sure. I think that what as somebody who grew up with, like I said, loving that season 32 and 33, 34, all that cast, I think that, my message for people who are of a, similar age demographic and somebody who loved the show from then is don't don't watch the show on Saturday thinking you're going to be seeing an episode from 2008. And like, I think I've made that mistake before I was doing the podcast, while I was just, like not as intertwined with the SNL community. I think I've watched the show when some of these cast members came back originally 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was. And I've watched the show thinking, okay, I'm going to get a show from my childhood. And I want to just temper the expectations that, this is a different era. You're taking a cast member and you're putting them in 2022. So if you watch the show with those eyes, I think you enjoy it more because like you're not turning on the TV expecting Don Pardo introducing the 10 cast members that you remember.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the show is so much the DNA of the writers and the time, and with that much time cramped in to produce it, it makes sense that it's going to be all new,
Yes. And I will say one more thing about the Andy Samberg point is that if John Solomon and Yorma come in, who are the writers on MacGruber, perhaps that's the connection to Andy Samberg coming in, where Yorma would be there already, potentially writing sketches. So could we get something from there?
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, you did such a wonderful job today on the Patron Feedback Show. I'm so thankful that you joined us.
This is so much fun.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else about Saturday Night Live that you want to say that you didn't get a chance to?
Oh, I just love that Kenan Thompson has been kind of a part of like the comedic background of so much of my life, that I just think it's great that he's like still there. And just with his history of being on like all that, it's like, it's neat to just have him as a figure that he's been doing sketch comedy like since I realized what sketch comedy is. And I'm curious how long he's going to be there. And I know rumors have floated around that maybe he'll replace Lorne Michaels, but who knows?
I don't.
Who knows? He might be the heir apparent in a Succession style story behind the scenes.
That would be interesting, but I wouldn't bet on that. That's what I would say. But yeah, but I am also, Keenan's been a large part of my life too. So totally second that. Okay. Listeners, everybody who's sending questions, patrons, thank you so much for checking out this Patron Feedback Show. If you were watching and you were like, hey, I'd love to come podcast on the Patron Feedback Show, well, you can do that. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/the SNL Network. It's one of the great perks of becoming a patron with us is that you can sign up to be on a Patron Feedback Show. You get to talk to me. We get to talk about Saturday Night Live. We have a lot of fun interacting with the chat. So really fun experience. You can also join our patron Facebook group where we get to share, stuff behind the scenes about the show, what our thoughts, opinions are. We get to be kind of, more open there in the patron Facebook group. So you're welcome to join us over there if you would like to. Patreon.com/the SNL Network. If you want to check out some of the other shows that we had going on this week, obviously we had a great hot take show this week. We had our 100th podcast on Monday night where we did the roundtable. We had 3 former cast members, ring the doorbell and join the show. That was a lot of fun. So make sure to check out that roundtable. And if you're interested, join us for Hollywood Dish tomorrow night. That is a show hosted by Nicole Rovine and Rebecca North, where they tell you everything that is trending this week going into Saturday Night Live so they can fill you in on what to expect SNL to talk about this week. I believe probably a little bit of Jamie Lynn and Britney Spears talk will be had on the show tomorrow night. So make sure to join that show and join them in the live chat. It's usually a lot of fun. All right, Matt, where can the listeners reach out to you?
Oh, yeah. If you go on Instagram and you type in @ReallyLateNight, that's the account for my comedy show. Or you could go to reallylatenight.com, or you could go into YouTube and type in Really Late Night with Matt Struck, and all my videos are there. And we're doing our 2nd annual comedy sketch festival in August. And we even have a podcast category. So me and you will talk later on about you guys getting involved in being a potential part of the comedy festival in the podcasting category, if you're interested.
100%. Yeah, we'll talk offline about that. So that sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. So if you would like to reach out to me at John Schneider 24, always happy to talk to you about Saturday Night Live. And if you want to find the show at the SNL Network, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, you can subscribe to us on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank everyone. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. And let's get excited about Will Forte coming back to host the show. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.